She sat alone on the edge of the airstrip, her aircraft already powered down, her name still missing from the flight log. No one greeted her. No one asked what she had just done. Inside the command tent, papers were being signed, some meant to erase her, others meant to commend her, but no one could agree on which came first. And then, everything changed. A single figure walked into the room, placed a folded citation on the table, and said 12 Marines were alive because of her. The conversation stopped. Orders were forgotten. A quiet kind of truth settled into the space where doubt had lived. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, please consider subscribing to hear more untold stories of extraordinary service and the heroes who walk among us, never asking for the recognition they deserve. The sun hit the edge of the flight line like a wall of heat, rising off the tarmac in distorted ripples that shimmered between aircraft shadows. Along the southern pads, a pair of Eurofighter crews were locking down their final pre-flight walkthroughs, their conversation sharp and full of clipped inside jokes. Beside a row of folding chairs and a cooler with condensation dripping off the lid, two French Mirage pilots argued over strike patterns while sipping electrolyte packets like it was a track meet. The scent of oil, sweat, and sunscreen hung under the drone of auxiliary power units humming across the ramp. It was a day built for movement, but not everyone was moving. Tessa stood near a sand-blasted maintenance cart with her helmet balanced upside down on the lid, clean and untouched. Her flight gloves were clipped to her belt loop, never far from reach, but never needed. She wore the standard flight vest tight, squared, but the call sign panel across her chest was blank. Her boots were quiet on the concrete. No one called her name. Not the ground crew. Not the pilot teams. Not the visiting observers watching the multinational close air support coordination unfold like theater in motion. A clipboard passed hands near the manifest table. A crew chief tapped a name on the sheet with a capped pen and said, "Lima slots held, just in case." The second officer snorted without looking up. "You mean the caution tape she'll get eyes on the ground before she gets that bird off?" Tessa didn't flinch. She adjusted the laminated overlays tucked inside her thigh pocket, pressing them flat beneath the weather seal flap. Each sheet had hand-marked safe corridors, angles of approach, and delay calculations in red grease pencil. She had double-checked them last night. She had checked them again this morning. Not because she doubted them, but because precision was the only part of the job that didn't lie. The tactical tent flapped in the dry crosswind, canvas pulsing in waves. Briefings played out in fast volleys from inside, overlapping languages and terms shouted over portable fans. Inside, mission boards were covered in touch screens and voice-activated telemetry feeds. Outside, Tessa unrolled her own transparent overlay and secured it to a battered aluminum case with two magnets she kept in her vest pocket. Her hands moved without hesitation. The markings were her own. The enemy compound sat framed at a 47-degree bearing. Red rings traced blast spread at 3 ranges, each one measured for human movement over sand and stone within a 2-second window. It was not doctrine. It was experience. Someone tossed a bottle toward the cooler and missed. It clattered near her boots. No one apologized. A pilot walking past muttered, "You bring those maps to church, too." His friend laughed. Tessa didn't look up. She folded the overlay back into thirds, slipped it behind her checklist, and reached for her helmet without lifting it. Her call sign was unspoken. Her hands were steady. She was already ready. They just didn't see it yet. The interior of the trailer held the dry chill of conditioned air and the low thrum of electrical current running beneath the floor panels. Tessa worked alone at a fold-out desk set against the rear wall. A weatherproof case cracked open beside her. Inside were laminated overlays, each labeled with a black grease marker and indexed with tabs along the edge. Her pencil, sharpened to a fine point with a manual blade she kept in a small tin, moved with practiced efficiency. Each mark she made was deliberate, a correction or refinement in a grid of numbers and arcs. A battered checklist was secured under a weighted clip. Red grease pencil ticked through each line, cross-referenced against a second table taped above the desk. That table tracked delay timing's human movement across urban structures, corner exposure rates, minimum safe distance for dismounts under suppressive fire. The equations had been refined from 2 years of field logs, stripped of anything speculative. Her chart didn't estimate fear. It calculated time to cover for an average adult with 80 pounds of kit, accounting for thermal distortion, optical lag, and wind dispersion. The chart didn't impress anyone. That wasn't its job. Across the hangar compound, the other pilots gathered in the ready tent, voices lifting in easy rhythm. The laughter came in bursts, underscored by the clatter of gear being sorted and resorted. Someone shouted across the lot for a refill on electrolyte packets. Someone else banged a wrench against a tool locker for no reason other than timing. No one stepped near her trailer. No one had reason to. Tessa flipped to the next overlay one for a compound marked 42 Bravo. Her pencil hovered near the southeast corridor. The alley line had shifted slightly in the last report, now angled just off-grid. She adjusted her note by a single degree, recalculating the clearance window for gun run entry. The sheet curled slightly from the dry air, edges lifting beneath the desk lamp's heat. A quiet shuffle at the entrance broke the silence. A younger pilot, barely out of his training cycle by the look of his still stiff sleeves, leaned against the frame. He peered in with a slight smirk. "You still doing those ghost runs?" "Ma'am, I thought you were grounded for being too careful." Tessa didn't look up. She made one final mark on the delay arc and set the pencil aside. The pilot stepped 1 foot inside, glancing at the maps. "You know they call you checklist captain behind the ready tent? That's not meant to be a compliment." He waited for a response. None came. She flipped to the next overlay. His amusement faltered, and after a few seconds he ducked back out into the light, his boots kicking gravel with more force than necessary. Behind her, the ventilation unit gave a soft knock. The air smelled faintly of paper and vinyl, mixed with the clean resin of the dry erase laminate. She adjusted the angle of the lamp and studied the terrain detail without speaking. The map on the desk held no colors, no dramatic borders, just relief lines, a red arc, and a hand-labeled timing band. 3 buildings framed the central corridor. One wall was crumbling, offering visual risk but partial cover. Her pencil hovered again, then set down. No more marks were needed. She had seen what she needed to see. Her gloves still hung at her belt. They hadn't moved all day. She slid the delay chart into a side sleeve, pressed the overlay flat, and reached for the laminated copy of her approach chart. No digital copy existed. It had never been logged into the shared terminal. This was for her eyes only. The moment it entered a group discussion, it would be dismissed. Too many variables, too many ethics, too much hesitation. She didn't need consensus. She needed certainty. Her eyes moved once more across the grid of 42 Bravo. She followed the route from north wall to inner court. Alley length 47 meters. Known obstacle partial rubble spill. Distance from nearest friendly position 12 meters and closing. She touched one fingertip to the corner edge, where her red arc intersected the exposed wall. That was where it would happen. That was the only corridor with a valid timing window between fire and entry. No system would ever green light it. No autopilot would take the shot. She didn't need clearance. She needed it to be right. And it was. The first round hit at 17 minutes past the hour. A patrol from Echo Company had just crossed the southern wall of Compound 42 Bravo when the lead team was cut off by coordinated fire from an unseen cluster behind the eastern courtyard. The JTAC call sign. Nova 1 immediately pushed for air. The terrain was dense, sun-baked walls flanking narrow alley corridors with no room to reposition and no visual of the shooters. Inside the base command tent, the strike map lit up with a priority KS request, flagged in red. The call was immediate and direct. Friendlies pinned, line of fire unconfirmed, requesting low-angle precision run. Danger close. 2 A-10s were already in orbit, holding at 100.0 north, ready for tasking. One of them, Call sign Brawler 9. Received an immediate fire clearance based on an initial GPS tag. The pilot confirmed visual on a vehicle moving past the courtyard breach. No time to verify passenger load. He rolled in fast, released with minimal delay. The feed blinked once on the command board. Seconds later, the overhead drone confirmed impact. Wrong vehicle. Civilian transport. The blast radius expanded toward the north wall. Echo's rear team lost their exit point. Comms traffic stuttered. Orders overlapped. The second Warthog was held in orbit pending review. The board went yellow, then silent. The operations officer stepped back from the table, palms hovering over the surface. His voice stayed calm, but his jaw was set. All strike windows are locked until PID is re-established. No one fires unless we get visual or ground flare confirmation. One of the sensor techs leaned in from the side. We're not going to get either. There's no elevation, no air marker. They're boxed in. Another officer crossed his arms, voice low. We pushed too fast. Now no one wants to take the second call. Across the room, Tessa stood behind the secondary console. Her gloves were still clipped to her belt. Her helmet sat on the table beside her. Clean, ready, untouched. On the map display, her call sign remained grayed out. Lima 6 not assigned. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The digital feed showed the eastern alley pinned with overlapping enemy movement. The spacing was exactly as she had drawn it earlier, 47 meters from breach to cover, with no room for bleed. Her red pen line still matched the route, but no system would flag it green. The fire line was too close, too human. The operations director leaned closer to the JTAC audio feed. Nova 1 came through, clipped and urgent. Echo is at grid 21/46. No safe egress. One friendly injured. Wall breach is gone. I need rounds north to south. 30 meters max. A pause. We copy, the director replied, but he didn't move. Nova 1's voice returned. You're not shooting. No clear angle. We have friendlies within margin. Then send someone who knows the margin. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Nova 1 spoke again. I've seen this map before. The red timing arc. That delay overlay. She's on your station. Isn't she Lima 6? The silence in the room shifted. One of the flight planners squinted at the command board. Tessa's on the bench. We haven't cleared her for active fire since the April sim. Another officer chimed in, shaking his head. She's too slow to pull. You put her up and she'll hold until it's too late. Someone looked across the room toward her. She was already picking up her helmet. The operations director didn't nod. He didn't object either. Tessa turned without speaking, pushed through the tent flap, and stepped into the sun. The heat hadn't dropped. The flight line still shimmered with engine exhaust and static haze. She walked past the prep tents without glancing sideways. One crew chief noticed her approaching and hesitated. He started to ask something, then saw the look in her eyes. Instead, he reached for the ladder and dropped it to the tarmac. Her aircraft was already fueled. The load was standard. The cannon had been inspected that morning by a different pilot who never showed for the brief. She climbed into the cockpit, methodical as always. Harness, power, feed sync. Her gloves slid on without hesitation. Inside the command tent, a red cursor blinked twice beside her call sign. Lima 6 active. No one said a word. Tessa's A-10 lifted clean from the ramp, the turbofans stabilizing into a steady hum as she climbed through 600 feet. The sun had shifted slightly west, washing the terrain in a pale, dust-heavy light. She leveled out and rolled toward grid 21/46. Her HUD pulsing red where the compound perimeter blinked with emergency tags. There was no fire clearance, no green light. Every digital solution flashed non-compliant. She didn't glance at them. Her hand settled naturally on the stick, calm and precise. The laminated delay map taped to the lower frame of her panel vibrated faintly from the airflow. A red arc cut across the alley just ahead of the breach, 47 meters from outer wall to cover. The range where every round counted. The margin where software refused to guess. Her targeting display flagged the zone as invalid. Too tight. Too complex. She adjusted course anyway. Lima 6. This is Nova 1. The J-TAC came through, his voice already pulled thin. We're at the breach. Friendlies prone along west wall. Enemy is holding elevation inside corridor. No movement from us. No cover. You are clear for visual-only assessment. Tessa responded evenly. Lima 6 copies. Requesting manual strike authority. Visual map overlay confirmed. Delay chart active. On bearing 185. There was a pause. Not long, but enough for her to know the request had reached the officer loop. Someone would hesitate. Someone always did. Nova 1 returned. Manual override granted. Danger close authorized. Execute as marked. She dropped 2 degrees. Airspeed decreased. Altitude steady at 620. The ridgeline rolled past under her nose. The compound emerged in profile. Dense with debris. Hot with the afterimage of the earlier misfire. Smoke drifted laterally over the rooftops. She dialed the screen contrast to cut glare. No target box appeared. She didn't wait for one. The alley's profile sharpened. She caught a flick of shadow at the breach wall, the staggered outline of a low barrier. No thermal confirmation, just geometry, just time. Nova 1 called again. Friendly at 29 meters. Closest hostile east of Alley Bend. We're locked flat. Any noise and they move first. She didn't answer. Her hands moved once, twice, and she squeezed. The GAU-8 cannon barked 3 times. The recoil rocked the airframe but barely shifted her bearing. Each round struck the northeast angle in a clean arc. Dust bloomed outward and then fell flat. A second later, the radio confirmed it. Impact clean, no overpressure, wall neutralized, no blue casualties, visual clear. Tessa pulled slightly left, held altitude, and came around wide. Second approach. She dropped to 600 even. Her hands were still relaxed, wrists low, elbows tucked. A bead of sweat traced her jaw and vanished into the collar of her flight vest. 2 hostiles relocating near burnt-out vehicle. Nova 1 called again. They've posted up behind exterior rubble. No safe way out. We're exposed north side. She watched the thermal drift flicker, unreadable in the heat. Targeting software struggled. No resolution. Still, she adjusted bearing by 1. Pitch at 5 degrees. No voice transmission. No confirmation. She released again. 2 rounds this time. Sharp. Fast. Controlled. They landed clean, crushing the edge of the vehicle frame and folding the rubble into a low curtain. The thermal flickered, then vanished. Nova 1 exhaled across the channel. Target down. Movement ceased. We're still flat. No ability to reposition. She circled once. Tighter now. The perimeter above the compound showed no additional heat sources. Her fuel levels held steady. The winds were calm. Last threat. The J-TAC reported. His voice thinner now. Movement inside breach window. Elevation north wall. No ground access. They've got drop control on us. We can't get around. Copy, she said. She came in for her third and final pass, cutting to 590 feet, lower than doctrine recommended, but well within what she had prepared. Her finger rested on the manual trigger. No flare, no marker, only shadow and structure. The window was narrow, the angle impossible to solve with anything but the eye and the map. She adjusted again. No sound but the shifting whine of the engine stabilizing. The chalked ledge of the breach met the end of her red arc exactly where she'd mapped it. She fired once. 1 round. It hit clean into the upper sill of the breach window. The wall caved inward. Partial collapse. No secondary detonation, no spall. Just silence. Nova 1's voice came through again. This time quiet. Still clipped, but something behind it had shifted. Lima 6. Fire line locked. Area clear. Echo is up. All accounted for. She did not reply. She shifted her heading to 280 and began a slow return climb. Her pulse was steady. Her back ached slightly from the lean, but she didn't shift posture until altitude cleared 800. Inside the cockpit, the delay chart flapped faintly from vibration. The red arc remained visible. Nothing about the panel had changed. She rolled out of the combat zone in full silence. No one else spoke on the open channel. Not the tower, not the forward observers, not command. They were still watching. She didn't offer a call-out. She didn't celebrate. She turned toward base. She said nothing. Tessa brought the A-10 down just as the sun edged below the ridgeline. The airstrip had gone from glaring heat to a long haze of diffused light, shadows stretching across the concrete like faint bruises. Her wheels touched down clean, her posture unchanged. No one met her on approach. There was no voice in her headset, no wave from ground crew, no gesture from the tower. She taxied slowly to the far edge of the ramp and eased into her shutdown sequence without a word. The canopy hissed open. Heat rose from the metal. Her gloves, worn now from the flight, unlatched without resistance. She coiled the headset cord manually and looped it through the vest ring. Her boots touched down, soft and deliberate, as she descended the ladder one rung at a time. She paused at the bottom step and ran her palm once along the streaked nose panel. Dust had collected in every seam. The forward gun shroud was darkened with powder. She didn't check the damage profile. She didn't need to. She knew. Inside the operations tent, the command staff was mid-debrief. The room was tense, filled with overlapping arguments about line authority, sequence of engagement, and the legality of the second pass that had struck the civilian transport. A static map of compound 42 Bravo was pinned on one screen, annotated with red hashes that no longer matched the current battlefield report. The same mistake was being circled and recircled on multiple tablets. The conversation was going in loops. She was never cleared to engage, one officer said flatly. Another replied, neither were the first two who missed, and they still pulled the trigger. She shouldn't have launched at all. Across the room, a Marine sergeant stepped through the canvas flap. He walked to the center of the tent without a word and held up a standard issue data drive. Helmet cam footage. Nova 1 told me to bring this myself. No one asked who he was. No one questioned the request. The comms tech accepted the drive and inserted it into the playback deck. For a moment, the screens flickered to static, then synced. The first image was off-angle, half buried in dust. A helmet-mounted view showed the courtyard ahead, shadowed, hot, claustrophobic. The breath of the Marine wearing it could be heard, tight and ragged, clipped between static. Then came the sound 3 bursts. Not panic fire, not suppression, just weight and precision. The camera shook slightly as the rounds impacted along the edge of the alley. On screen, the wall held, no friendlies moved. The corridor stayed intact. Then, Nova 1's voice came over the feed, controlled but audibly strained. Lima 6, confirm second angle, hostiles at rubble line. The next 2 rounds landed seconds later. A hostile shape dropped forward, limp across the edge of a burnt-out frame. No blast touched the Marines pinned behind cover. The camera caught a voice, low and in awe, not meant for broadcast. She's painting with a scalpel. Then came the final pass. The helmet tilted upward. One figure remained inside the north wall breach, a shadow behind the frame. The screen jostled once, then a single impact. The breach folded inward as if peeled away by wind. No explosion, just absence. No shout of confirmation, just a single statement from the radio channel. Lima 6, fire line locked, area clear. The screen froze. The playback looped automatically. Silence in the tent. The operations board lit with the faint green of unclaimed updates. No one reached for them. One of the younger controllers spoke, voice hushed. That was her. That was Tessa. Across the table, an officer blinked slowly. She wasn't on the manifest. She was never off it, the Marine sergeant said. She just never got a slot. Another officer leaned forward, rewound the video to the breach strike, and paused it. On the screen, just before the final round, the cockpit reflection was visible in the corner of the canopy. A strip of tape, a laminated sheet, the red arc she had drawn by hand. That's the map, someone said quietly. The one she brought to the briefing. The one we said was theoretical. She built it for this, said the tech. She built it the sergeant replied, "so we'd all live through it." A pause. Longer this time. Then the operations director stepped back and muttered, "She's the only one who didn't miss." Outside, the light shifted again, edging into full rust. Tessa stood beside the warthog with a length of soft cloth in hand, wiping the leading edge of the wing. The motion wasn't urgent, just habitual. The kind of detail you kept not for cleanliness, but for order. The kind of care that came after a job you didn't need applause for. Her gloves were off now, set beside her helmet on the rear strut, both marked with sweat. Her flight vest was unzipped at the collar. She hadn't moved from the aircraft since stepping down. Inside, the footage looped again. No one turned it off. The tent had gone still. No arguments. No scapegoats. Just the sound of distant rotors from another sector, and the soft echo of her voice through the radio, repeated at low volume. "Strike is marked. Delay overlay confirmed. I'm on bearing 185. No one in the tent said her name aloud, but they all knew. The operations director moved to the edge of the tent and pushed through the flap. He squinted toward the ramp where she stood alone beside the warthog. She didn't turn, didn't raise a hand. She was focused on a panel seam near the wing root, brushing dust away with a quiet, practiced stroke. He didn't speak. He didn't step closer. He just stood there and watched. The morning air inside the planning tent held a sharpness that hadn't been there the night before. It wasn't cold, just clean. Still. A stack of forms sat on the center table beneath a low plastic light, the top page bearing her name in block print. No rank. No unit. Logo. Just the letters of her identity and a printed code. Beside it, unauthorized engagement, deviation from manifest, breach of airspace protocol. 3 officers sat around the table, none of them speaking. The legal officer tapped the end of a capped pen against the form twice before pausing. By procedure, it's a strike against her. She launched without air boss confirmation, engaged with no telemetry return, and disobeyed direct standby order. The operations chief didn't look up from the map display, and in return, every round hit its mark. 3 passes, confirmed neutralizations, 0 fratricide. She extracted a pinned squad from an unrecoverable alley with nothing but geometry and wind. That doesn't make it authorized. Across the table, the intelligence liaison pulled up her mission code. It wasn't authorized, but it was right. If this goes to review, we're the ones explaining why we denied the one clean shot of the entire rotation. Footsteps sounded near the flap before anyone answered. Then the canvas shifted, and a Marine colonel stepped in. He wore his uniform lightly wrinkled from the night, dust on the edges, sleeves still cuffed. He crossed the room without greeting, without announcement, and laid a folded document flat on the table. Signed, initialed, filed through combat logistics, citation for valor, recipient Lima 6. He tapped the page once with 2 fingers and said, "That pilot is the reason I have 12 Marines who should have been listed as KIA this morning. There's no gray in that." One of the junior officers muttered without conviction, "Who authorized her?" The colonel didn't hesitate. "She didn't wait to be." No one replied. The legal officer pulled the disciplinary form out from the pile, folded it slowly along the center line, then tore it in half without ceremony. The sound was soft, but final. He dropped both halves in the bin under the table. Outside, the base came alive 1 task at a time. Refuelers moved across the tarmac. Technicians opened toolkits and called for power checks. Over the intercom, the PA system buzzed once, then crackled clear. Lima 6, mission confirmed. Debrief 0800. Voices quieted across the hangar. No one laughed. No one asked for clarification. At 7:40, a new name appeared on the ready board. The laminated white strip beneath the fixed-wing KAS column had been replaced. The new entry was stenciled directly on the panel in black ink. Lima 6, confirmed, active. Tessa walked into the hangar from the west lot, gloves in her left hand, helmet cradled against her hip. She passed 2 crews working diagnostics and a refuel team checking connections. None of them said anything, but a few looked up, One nodded slightly. No salute. Just a moment of acknowledgement that hadn't existed 24 hours earlier. She didn't respond. Her pace never changed. Near the lockers, she found her map set still folded exactly where she had left it on the top shelf, marked with red arcs and a column of distances copied by hand. She slipped it into the front of her vest, careful not to press the fold flat. It belonged there now. The pilot who had once called her checklist captain stood near the mission printout wall. He glanced over, didn't smile, didn't speak, but stepped aside to give her space. That was enough. She crossed toward the tarmac again. Her aircraft was being refueled. The rear stabilizer was still marked with the last flight code, but someone had added her call sign in dry marker on the inspection slip. She paused there for a long moment, not staring, not reflecting, just reading what had changed. In the command tent, the officers had begun their second rotation brief. The operations chief had erased the red blocks from the strike map and replaced them with a clean set. No one brought up the April sim. No one referenced her caution. Instead, her targeting solution had been entered into the example archive as reference pattern Sierra Echo Lima 6. In the hallway leading to the debrief room, a small sheet had been pinned to the corkboard. It held only one name and one quote beneath it. The quote read, "She didn't wait to be." It wasn't labeled or signed. At precisely 0800, Tessa entered the debriefing chamber. Her gloves were still in hand. Her helmet now rested under her arm. She sat where she was told. No words were offered. No applause. Just a flight log and a copy of her own audio transcript. The director of operations slid a new badge across the table. It bore her call sign and no expiration date. The colonel was in the corner, arms folded. He didn't interrupt, didn't speak. He watched her read the log, page by page, until she gave a single nod. Nothing more. The meeting lasted just under 19 minutes. At no point did anyone question what she had done. At no point did anyone say thank you. When she exited, the hangar floor had gone quiet again. The morning heat was starting to build, but the breeze hadn't faded yet. She crossed toward the flight line, boots scuffing faintly across the concrete. She reached her aircraft just as the crew began stowing the fueling hoses. She walked around the wing once, checking the panel seams. No checklist, no clipboard, just eyes and hands. Then she paused. She took the gloves, still looped at her wrist, and unclipped them fully. Folded once, they slid into the vest pouch beside the map. Not stored, not hung, carried. The sky above was pale blue, streaked faintly with heat. She didn't look back at the tent, didn't speak to the aircrew, didn't mark the moment. She walked forward, past the roster board, toward the comms office. Her call sign was there now. It didn't need to be said. It was written in ink. She never raised her voice. She never demanded recognition. And yet, when everything fell silent, hers was the only judgment that held. Tessa's journey was not loud, not fast, not easy to admire in a world that celebrates impulse over intention. But her strength was in restraint, her clarity forged in discipline, and her power came from knowing that doing the right thing often means doing it alone. This is not just a story about a pilot. It is about anyone who has ever been underestimated for being steady, overlooked for being principled, or dismissed for refusing to break. If you saw yourself in her, or felt something shift in the quiet moments she never claimed, we invite you to reflect on that. Share your thoughts in the comments, and follow for more stories about those who lead not with volume, but with vision. The ones who never ask for credit and never need to.